Happy 4th of July to everyone celebrating across America. On this special day of freedom, family, and gratitude, let me share a story that reminds us the greatest homecoming is not measured by parades or fireworks, but by the love that never gives up. Now, let us start the story. Go ahead, someone laughed. Salute that flag if it makes you feel important. The words drifted across the town square just as the first notes of the national anthem echoed through the crisp July morning, and for a heartbeat, it seemed as though every conversation, every footstep, every restless movement paused except the quiet figure standing near the edge of the crowd. Caleb Mercer straightened his worn olive jacket, squared his shoulders, and raised a steady hand toward the stars and stripes as it climbed the flagpole above the Veterans Memorial Plaza. His boots were old. His jacket had faded with time. His silver-streaked hair caught the morning breeze. To most of the people gathered there, he looked like another forgotten veteran clinging to memories no one cared about anymore. A teenage boy smirked. A businessman rolled his eyes. Someone whispered that the old guy probably just wanted attention. Laughter spread in small waves before disappearing beneath the music. Caleb never looked away from the flag. His expression remained calm, almost peaceful, as sunlight reflected across the polished granite engraved with the names of men and women who had once answered their country's call. He had stood this way more times than anyone there could imagine. He knew the weight of silence. He knew the cost of freedom. But he had long ago stopped expecting strangers to understand either. Just a few feet away stood 9-year-old Abigail Mercer, clutching a small paper American flag with both hands. She looked up at her father with quiet pride, unaware of every whispered insult floating through the crowd. To her, he wasn't a broken veteran wearing an old jacket. He was simply Dad, the man who packed her school lunches, helped with homework every evening, and never missed saying goodnight. Across the plaza, sleek black SUVs pulled quietly to the curb. Claire Whitmore stepped out first, elegant. In a tailored cream-colored summer suit, her confident stride matching the polished image that had made her one of America's youngest aerospace CEOs. Cameras immediately followed her. Local officials hurried to greet her. She smiled graciously, shook hands, and thanked the veterans gathered for the ceremony. Then, almost absent-mindedly, her eyes drifted toward the man still saluting alone near the memorial. She barely noticed him at first. Another forgotten face. Another aging veteran among many. But something about the absolute stillness in his posture refused to leave her thoughts. While everyone else shifted, checked their phones, or glanced around impatiently, Caleb never moved. It was not discipline performed for an audience. It was reverence practiced over a lifetime. Claire found herself watching him a second longer than she intended before the mayor gently guided her toward the front row. Behind her, the laughter started again, softer now but no less cruel. "Guess he thinks he's still somebody," a man muttered. Caleb heard every word. He answered none of them. His eyes remained fixed on the flag waving high against the bright blue American sky. No one standing in that plaza could have imagined that the quiet father they mocked had once carried a secret buried so deeply inside America's history that even his name had vanished from public record. And before the sun set on this Independence Day, the beautiful CEO who barely noticed him would discover that the man everyone dismissed had once saved a nation without ever asking for recognition in return. If you enjoy thoughtful stories with real emotion, please subscribe and support the channel. We truly appreciate it. And for those watching, have you ever experienced something like this in your own life? Share your story in the comments. Now, let's get back to the story. When the ceremony ended, the applause followed the politicians, the cameras followed Claire Whitmore, and the crowd slowly drifted toward food trucks and live music scattered around the park. Caleb Mercer quietly lowered his hand, adjusted the cuff of his faded jacket, and smiled as Abigail skipped over with her little paper flag still waving proudly in the warm breeze. "Did I stand still enough, Daddy?" she asked with bright blue eyes full of hope. Caleb chuckled softly. "You stood with respect. That is what matters." She reached for his hand as naturally as breathing. Can we get lemonade now? I think we earned two, he replied. They walked away from the memorial without looking back, unnoticed once again. The festival stretched across nearly 3 city blocks, filled with families, veterans, children chasing balloons, and volunteers serving barbecue beneath rows of white tents. Caleb greeted everyone the same way he always did, with a quiet nod, never expecting anyone to remember his name. Most did not. That never seemed to bother him. Years ago, he had learned that real service did not depend on applause. Abigail tugged gently on his sleeve when they passed a booth selling handcrafted wooden flags. They are beautiful. Caleb stopped to admire them. His eyes lingered on the careful workmanship rather than the price tags. The elderly craftsman smiled warmly. You have a good eye. Caleb returned the smile. Someone spent a lot of time making these. The man nodded proudly. 3 days for each one. Caleb thanked him without mentioning that he recognized the precision of military woodworking techniques. Some knowledge simply stayed with a person forever. A few minutes later, father and daughter settled onto a shaded bench beneath a sprawling oak tree. Abigail happily sipped her lemonade while Caleb unfolded a small paper bag holding 2 simple turkey sandwiches he had prepared before sunrise. You always cut mine into stars, Abigail said with a grin. That is because ordinary sandwiches taste better when they look special. She laughed. Mom used to say that too. For a brief moment, silence settled between them. Caleb looked toward the distant flag still dancing above the memorial. His wedding band no longer rested on his hand, but memories remained in places no one else could see. Abigail gently leaned against his shoulder without saying another word. She had inherited her mother's kindness along with her patience. Nearby, Claire Whitmore concluded another interview praising community service, innovation, and the importance of honoring veterans. Reporters thanked her before rushing toward the next headline. As her security team prepared to leave, Claire found herself glancing across the park almost instinctively. She spotted Caleb sitting beneath the oak tree, carefully wiping mustard from Abigail's cheek with a folded napkin while pretending not to notice her playful attempt to dodge him. The little girl burst into laughter. Caleb laughed too, quietly, the kind of laugh belonging to someone who treasured simple moments more than grand achievements. Claire paused. Something about the scene felt strangely familiar, though she could not explain why. Her assistant approached with the event schedule. We are running 10 minutes behind. Claire nodded automatically, but her attention remained fixed on the father and daughter. Wealth had surrounded her entire adult life, yet she could not remember the last time she had seen contentment that looked so genuine. She turned away, trying to dismiss the unexpected feeling, never realizing that only a few feet from where Caleb sat rested a weathered canvas backpack containing a small locked wooden box that held enough forgotten history to change everything she believed about the quiet man everyone else had already forgotten. The afternoon sun settled gently across the town square, casting long golden shadows over rows of white tents as laughter and country music blended into the easy rhythm of the holiday celebration. Trevor Mills, the energetic master of ceremonies, stepped back onto the outdoor stage with a wireless microphone and an oversized smile that seemed polished more for cameras than for kindness. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced, before our next performance, let us recognize some hometown heroes. Applause rippled through the crowd. Veterans seated in the front rows stood one by one as Trevor welcomed each with cheerful enthusiasm, asking about years of service, favorite memories, and offering handshakes that drew warm applause. Then his eyes wandered beyond the front rows until they landed on Caleb Mercer quietly folding the empty sandwich bag beside Abigail. Trevor pointed toward him with exaggerated excitement. Sir, you in the old green jacket. Come on up here. Do not be shy. Caleb looked around, almost certain the invitation was meant for someone else. Abigail smiled brightly. Go, Daddy. Caleb gave a small nod, rose from the bench, brushed a few blades of grass from his jeans, and walked toward the stage with calm, measured steps. The crowd watched curiously. Trevor welcomed him with a grin that slowly shifted into amusement as he noticed the worn jacket and weathered boots. "Thank you for joining us. Were you in the military?" Caleb answered simply. "Yes." Trevor tilted his head dramatically. "Army? Navy? Air Force? Or is this one of those mysterious answers?" A few people laughed. Caleb replied in the same steady voice. "I served where I was needed." More laughter followed. Trevor leaned closer. "That sounds very impressive. So tell us, what incredible stories are you hiding from us today?" Caleb looked briefly toward the flag fluttering above the memorial before answering. "The people who deserve to be remembered are the ones who never came home." The words hung quietly in the warm afternoon air. For a brief second, several veterans in the front row lowered their eyes. Trevor forced another smile, unwilling to let the mood become too serious. "Come on now. Everyone has at least one good story. Surely you have something exciting." Caleb gently shook his head. "Doing your duty should never become entertainment." The audience became noticeably quieter, but a businessman near the stage chuckled loudly. Dylan Brooks folded his expensive sunglasses and called out, "Maybe he just likes sounding important." A few scattered laughs answered him. Caleb neither frowned nor defended himself. He simply thanked Trevor with a polite nod and prepared to step away from the microphone. Abigail, standing near the stage beside a volunteer, watched her father with unwavering admiration. She did not see embarrassment. She saw strength. Claire Whitmore stood only a few yards away, speaking with city officials, yet every word exchanged on that stage had reached her ears. She noticed something that everyone else overlooked. As Caleb turned to leave, his jacket sleeve shifted slightly, revealing a faded embroidered insignia stitched onto the inside cuff rather than the outside where ordinary military patches belonged. Claire's expression changed almost imperceptibly. She had seen that unusual symbol only once before during a classified aerospace presentation years earlier. It had appeared for less than a second on a restricted historical briefing before the slide had immediately disappeared. Her heartbeat slowed. Her mind searched old memories she had not revisited in years. While the crowd dismissed Caleb as another quiet veteran with nothing remarkable to say, Claire could not shake the feeling that she had just seen a piece of American history hidden in plain sight. Claire Whitmore remained composed on the outside, smiling politely as another city official thanked her for sponsoring the memorial restoration, yet her thoughts had already drifted far from the conversation. That small embroidered insignia hidden inside Caleb Mercer's jacket sleeve continued to linger in her mind like a melody she almost recognized but could not quite name. It was not a standard military emblem. It belonged somewhere far beyond ordinary service records. She had seen it years ago during a confidential aerospace security briefing at Whitmore Aerospace after her father's retirement. The presentation had lasted less than 30 minutes. One slide had appeared briefly before a government representative immediately removed it, explaining that the operation remained permanently classified. Claire had never forgotten the unusual symbol, mostly because her father had become strangely quiet after seeing it. She stepped away from the gathering and motioned discreetly for her executive assistant, Nathan Ellis, to follow. "Nathan," she said softly, "I need you to look into someone." He opened the secure tablet he always carried. "Name?" Claire hesitated for only a moment. "Caleb Mercer. Former military. Around 43 years old. Start with public records, but if nothing appears, contact our government liaison." Quietly. Nathan raised an eyebrow. "Is there a problem?" Claire looked back toward the festival where Caleb was helping Abigail throw small beanbags at a children's carnival game. Every time his daughter missed the target, he smiled as though losing together mattered more than winning alone. "I do not know," Claire answered honestly. "But something does not fit." Nathan nodded once and walked several yards away before placing a discreet phone call. Claire remained standing beneath the shade of an American elm, watching father and daughter from a distance. Abigail finally landed a perfect throw, earning a stuffed bald eagle nearly as large as her backpack. She hugged it tightly before wrapping her free arm around Caleb's waist. He laughed quietly and bowed dramatically as though she had won an Olympic medal. Nearby parents smiled at the touching moment without recognizing the man from the stage only minutes earlier. The laughter that had mocked him had already faded into the noise of the afternoon. Caleb himself seemed to have forgotten it completely. He never glanced toward the stage again. He simply focused on Abigail, listening as she excitedly explained where the stuffed eagle should sleep when they returned home. Claire found herself unexpectedly smiling. There was no bitterness in Caleb's face. No desire to prove anyone wrong. Only patience, quiet dignity, and the steady confidence of someone whose worth had never depended upon public approval. Nearly 20 minutes passed before Nathan returned, his calm expression noticeably altered. He lowered his voice. Public military records are almost empty. Claire frowned. Empty. Almost everything is sealed. His service history lists honorable discharge, but entire sections have been removed under federal authority. I have never seen anything quite like it. Claire felt a slow chill despite the warm summer air. Nathan continued carefully. I also contacted our liaison at the Department of Defense. They refused to discuss the file. However, before ending the call, the officer asked me one question. Claire met his eyes. What question? Nathan swallowed quietly. He asked why Whitmore Aerospace was interested in a man who should have remained forgotten. Claire turned toward Caleb once more as he lifted Abigail onto his shoulders so she could wave her tiny American flag above the crowd. In that peaceful father, she no longer saw an overlooked veteran. She saw the outline of a secret so carefully protected that even asking about it had caused trained officials to become uneasy. Claire Whitmore had built her career on facts, engineering, and evidence. She did not believe in coincidence, and she certainly did not believe that a forgotten veteran with sealed records had wandered into her company's Independence Day event by chance. Nathan stood beside her beneath the shade of the elm tree, holding his tablet with unusual hesitation. There is one more thing, he said quietly. Claire looked at him. Go on. The liaison would not release the file, but after I identified Whitmore Aerospace, he transferred me to a retired colonel who worked with our company years ago. The colonel would only say one sentence before ending the call. Claire waited. Nathan took a slow breath. He said, if Caleb Mercer is alive, then one of America's greatest promises was kept. The words settled over Claire with unexpected weight. She immediately excused herself from the remaining public appearances and stepped inside the quiet executive trailer parked behind the festival stage. Closing the door behind her, she unlocked a secure archive stored on her company's encrypted network. Very few people knew it existed. Among thousands of historical contracts and government partnerships rested a digital collection inherited from her late father, Thomas Whitmore, whose career had been deeply connected to national aerospace research. Claire entered a series of authorization codes before typing two simple words into the search field. Mercer. Caleb. For several silent seconds, nothing appeared. Then a single restricted folder surfaced without a preview image. The access date showed nearly 20 years earlier. Her heartbeat quickened as she opened it. Most of the pages remained heavily redacted, lines covered beneath black government markings. Yet a handful of sentences had been cleared for permanent historical reference. She read them twice before she fully understood their meaning. Years earlier, during a classified aerospace crisis, an experimental defense guidance system carrying technology that would eventually protect millions of American civilians had faced catastrophic loss after a critical systems failure during a covert transport mission. Public records had never acknowledged the incident because revealing it would have exposed sensitive national capabilities. The report did not describe dramatic heroics or impossible feats. Instead, it spoke of extraordinary leadership, calm decision-making, and one officer who refused to abandon the mission until every member of his team reached safety and the technology had been secured. At the bottom of the page appeared a single name. Captain Caleb Mercer. Status: Commendation permanently classified under Federal Security Authority. Claire slowly lowered the tablet. Her father had often spoken about anonymous Americans whose sacrifices would never appear in history books. As a child she had assumed those stories were symbolic. Now one of those names stood only a few hundred feet away, buying lemonade for his daughter while strangers laughed at his worn jacket. Another document caught her attention. Attached to the mission summary was a handwritten note from Thomas Whitmore himself. The ink had faded with time, but every word remained clear. If this man had failed, our company would never have completed the program that shaped the future of American aerospace. We owe him more than we can ever repay, even if he never knows our names. Claire closed her eyes for a moment. Her father had passed away believing that debt could never be repaid. She opened them again and looked through the trailer window toward the festival. Caleb was kneeling beside Abigail, patiently tying the loose lace on her sneaker while she hugged the stuffed eagle against her chest. He smiled as though the little task before him was the most important responsibility in the world. In that quiet moment, Claire understood something that everyone else had missed. The man they had mocked had never been searching for recognition because he had already given America everything he believed it deserved. The afternoon celebration continued as though nothing extraordinary had happened. Children chased one another between picnic tables, a local band played familiar patriotic songs, and volunteers passed out slices of homemade apple pie beneath red, white, and blue banners fluttering in the gentle breeze. Caleb Mercer and Abigail found a quiet place near the edge of the memorial fountain where they could escape the growing crowd. Abigail carefully set her stuffed eagle beside her and dipped one finger into the cool water. "Daddy, do you think Mommy would have liked today?" she asked softly. Caleb smiled with the kind of warmth that carried both gratitude and longing. "She would have loved seeing you smile." Abigail nodded. "I think she would have liked the eagle too." Caleb laughed quietly. "I think you are probably right." Before he could say another word, a deep rumble echoed from beyond the park entrance. At first, most people assumed another parade vehicle had arrived. Several children ran toward the sidewalk, expecting antique trucks or classic convertibles. Instead, a line of dark government vehicles rolled slowly through the entrance without sirens or flashing lights. Their polished black paint reflected the afternoon sun as they came to a respectful stop beside the Veterans Memorial Plaza. Conversations faded. The music stopped. Even Trevor Mills lowered his microphone in confusion. Uniformed service members stepped from the vehicles with calm precision, not hurried, not dramatic, simply disciplined. An older general wearing rows of service ribbons walked at the front of the group. His silver hair was neatly trimmed, and his measured pace carried the quiet confidence of a lifetime spent serving something larger than himself. He scanned the crowd only briefly before his eyes settled on one man sitting beside the fountain with a little girl. The general changed direction immediately. Every soldier behind him followed without hesitation. Curious whispers spread across the plaza. Dylan Brooks folded his arms, assuming the visitors had come to honor the celebrity chief executive or one of the elected officials standing near the stage. Claire Whitmore already knew better. She watched silently as the distance between the general and Caleb slowly disappeared. Abigail noticed the approaching uniforms first. She tugged gently on her father's sleeve. "Daddy, those soldiers are coming this way." Caleb looked up, and for the first time that afternoon, surprise briefly crossed his face. He stood slowly, brushing invisible dust from his old jacket before placing one reassuring hand on Abigail's shoulder. The general stopped only a few feet away. Neither man spoke immediately. For one long moment, they simply looked at each other with the quiet recognition shared by people whose history needed no explanation. Then, without the slightest hesitation, the general stood perfectly straight and delivered a crisp salute. Every service member behind him did exactly the same. The movement was so perfectly synchronized that the entire plaza seemed to fall into complete silence. Caleb returned the salute with calm dignity, his expression unchanged except for the faintest hint of gratitude in his eyes. The general lowered his hand and smiled gently. "Captain Mercer," he said in a voice that carried clearly across the still crowd, "it has been far too many years." Caleb answered with quiet humility. "General Harrison. It is good to see you again." The general nodded once before speaking the words that no one gathered there would ever forget. "America may keep some stories classified, Captain, but it never forgets the people who protected them." Around the memorial, every whisper disappeared. The same crowd that had laughed only hours before now stood motionless, looking at the quiet single father with entirely different eyes, while Claire realized that the truth she had uncovered was only the beginning of a story far greater than anyone had imagined. For several long seconds, no one in the plaza seemed willing to breathe. The only sound came from the gentle breeze moving through the rows of American flags lining the memorial walkway. General Harrison lowered his salute, but the respect in his eyes never faded. "You disappeared exactly as they asked you to," he said quietly. Caleb offered a modest smile. "That was part of the promise." The general nodded. "And you kept it better than any of us expected." Abigail looked up at her father with innocent curiosity. "Daddy, who is he?" Caleb rested a gentle hand on her shoulder. "An old friend." General Harrison smiled warmly at the little girl. "Your father has always been too humble to tell the whole story." Before Caleb could answer, Claire Whitmore stepped forward slowly. The confidence that usually filled every boardroom she entered had been replaced by sincere humility. She stopped a respectful distance away, looking first at General Harrison and then at Caleb. "Captain Mercer," she said softly, "may I ask you something?" Caleb met her eyes without resentment. "Of course." Claire hesitated. "Is it true that the mission mentioned in the archived records helped protect the aerospace guidance program my father's company later completed?" Caleb remained silent for a moment before answering carefully. "Many people contributed to that program. I was only one of them." General Harrison gently shook his head. "That is exactly what he has always said." He turned toward Claire. "Your father never forgot him." Claire felt her throat tighten. "Neither will I." She reached into her handbag and carefully unfolded an old photograph she had found inside the archived folder only minutes earlier. The edges had faded with time. Several uniformed service members stood beside unfamiliar equipment inside a military hangar. One man near the center wore the same calm expression Caleb carried today. Standing beside him was a younger Thomas Whitmore, smiling proudly with one hand resting on Caleb's shoulder. Claire stared at the photograph before looking back at the quiet father standing before her. "My father wrote that without you, Whitmore Aerospace would never have become what it is today." Caleb looked at the photograph for the first time in many years. A faint smile crossed his face. Thomas was a good man. He cared about the people behind the work more than the headlines. Claire slowly lowered the photograph. "He also wrote that our family owed you more than we could ever repay." Caleb gently shook his head. "Nobody owes me anything. Your father spent the rest of his life building something that helped this country. That was repayment." Enough. Those simple words settled over the gathering with more power than any speech delivered from the stage that afternoon. Dylan Brooks quietly removed his sunglasses, suddenly unable to meet Caleb's eyes. Trevor Mills lowered his microphone completely, realizing that every joke he had made now echoed inside his own conscience. Claire felt something shift deep within her heart. She had spent years measuring success through market value, innovation, and influence, yet the man standing before her measured life through service, gratitude, and quiet responsibility. For the first time in many years, she realized that true greatness rarely announced itself. It simply lived with dignity until someone cared enough to recognize it. As Abigail slipped her small hand into her father's again, Claire silently made a promise to herself that the debt her father had carried for decades would no longer remain hidden alongside the man who had never once asked to be remembered. The silence that settled across the memorial carried more weight than any applause ever could. One by one, people who had laughed earlier lowered their eyes, suddenly embarrassed by words they wished they could take back. Trevor Mills was the first to step forward. The microphone that had once felt so natural in his hand now seemed unusually heavy. He looked directly at Caleb before speaking. "Captain Mercer, I owe you an apology. I tried to turn your service into entertainment, and I was wrong." The plaza remained quiet. Caleb answered with the same calm voice he had used all afternoon. "We all make mistakes. What matters is what we learn from them." Trevor slowly nodded, humbled more by forgiveness than he would have been by anger. Dylan Brooks approached next, removing his expensive watch as though it suddenly meant nothing. "I judged you because of an old jacket," he admitted. "I never stopped long enough to see the man wearing it." Caleb smiled gently. "Clothes tell very little about character." Dylan lowered his head, unable to find another response. Around them, families who had been preparing to leave quietly returned toward the memorial. Veterans standing throughout the crowd instinctively formed a respectful line, not because anyone instructed them to, but because honor recognized honor. Claire Whitmore watched every moment with growing admiration. She had witnessed billion-dollar negotiations collapse under pressure, yet she had never seen quiet grace transform so many hearts in only a few minutes. She stepped closer, kneeling slightly so she could speak to Abigail at eye level. "That is a beautiful eagle," she said warmly. Abigail hugged the stuffed bird against her chest. "Daddy won it with me." Claire smiled. "I think your father has helped many people win important things." Abigail looked proudly at Caleb. "He says the best prize is when people are kind to each other." Claire felt tears quietly gathering in her eyes. That simple sentence carried more wisdom than many speeches she had heard from influential leaders. She stood again and faced Caleb. "My father spent years searching for a way to thank you. I cannot change the past, but I would like to honor his wish." Caleb looked at her kindly. "Your father already honored me by living a life of purpose." Claire gently shook her head. "He believed gratitude should be visible." Before Caleb could answer, General Harrison spoke with quiet approval. "Sometimes accepting gratitude allows others to become better people." Caleb reflected on those words for a long moment before offering a small nod. "Then let it never be about me. Let it always be about those who served quietly beside me." Claire smiled through grateful eyes. "I promise." The afternoon sun began sinking lower behind the memorial, bathing the granite walls in warm amber light. Children who had never understood the earlier laughter now stood beside aging veterans in peaceful silence. Abigail reached for her father's hand once more. "Daddy," she whispered. "Yes, sweetheart." She looked up at the American flag still waving above them. "Is that why you always salute even when nobody is watching?" Caleb squeezed her hand gently. "No, Abigail. I salute because some people gave everything so the flag would still be there when someone finally decided to look up." No one spoke after that. Across the memorial, dozens of eyes slowly lifted toward the flag, and for the first time that day, every person standing beneath it understood that respect was never earned by being noticed. It was earned by quietly choosing what was right, even when no one was looking. 3 months passed before anyone in the town truly understood that some moments do not end when the crowd goes home. They quietly become part of the people who witnessed them. On a cool autumn morning, beneath a sky painted with soft shades of gold and blue, the Veterans Memorial Plaza welcomed families once again. This time there were no television cameras searching for dramatic headlines, no reporters chasing breaking news, and no speeches promising easy applause. Instead, neighbors gathered because they wanted to be there. Veterans stood shoulder to shoulder with teachers, mechanics, nurses, firefighters, students, and young military families. At the center of the plaza stood a simple bronze plaque covered by a small American flag. Claire Whitmore stepped to the podium with none of the polished confidence that usually defined corporate presentations. Her voice carried something different now. Gratitude. Today is not about celebrating one man, she began. It is about remembering the quiet people whose character helped build this nation without asking for recognition. She paused before turning toward Caleb Mercer. My father believed that gratitude should become action. Today, Whitmore Aerospace is establishing the Caleb Mercer Foundation, dedicated to scholarships for the children of veterans who served with honor and returned home to begin new battles as parents, neighbors, and ordinary citizens. Warm applause filled the plaza, but Caleb lowered his eyes almost shyly. He quietly leaned toward Claire as she stepped away from the podium. You did not have to name it after me. Claire smiled gently. Perhaps. But every child who benefits from it will learn why it carries your name. General Harrison placed a weathered hand on Caleb's shoulder. Sometimes accepting honor is another form of service. Caleb looked across the gathering until his eyes found Abigail standing in the front row holding the same stuffed bald eagle she had won during the summer festival. She smiled exactly the way her mother once had, with hope untouched by pride. Caleb walked to the small monument and carefully pulled away the covering flag. Beneath it appeared a simple inscription. In honor of Captain Caleb Mercer and every quiet American whose service was measured not by applause but by character, dignity, and sacrifice. Caleb read the words silently before looking toward the flagpole rising above the memorial. As the first notes of the national anthem drifted across the plaza, every conversation faded. Without instruction, everyone stood. Caleb gently took Abigail's hand. Father and daughter faced the flag together. His old olive jacket remained faded. His boots were still worn. Nothing about his appearance had changed. Yet everything about the way people saw him had. Caleb slowly raised his hand in salute. One after another, veterans followed. Then parents. Then children. Finally, the entire plaza stood united beneath the waving stars and stripes. Claire remained perfectly still, her eyes glistening as she watched the quiet father who had unknowingly changed her understanding of success forever. No one laughed. No one whispered. No one searched for another joke. There was only respectful silence carried gently on the autumn wind. And in that silence, the greatest truth of all quietly revealed itself. Real heroes rarely ask the world to notice them. They simply keep choosing honor, kindness, and responsibility until one ordinary day the world finally becomes quiet enough to notice them. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe and turn on the notification bell for more emotional stories like this. And before you go, what state are you watching from? Drop it in the comments below. See you in the next story.